I was explaining double bind to one of my kids the other day, kind of like you're supposed to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul, but it doesn't count if you do it because you were told to. So, you see something like that.
Oh, that's a good point, because there's one of the things I train my clients. There's no virtue in not sinning because you were scared to do the sin. There's no virtue
Right.
in doing something good out of fear or shame.
Right. Right.
It's what I'm doing with our work is actually freeing clients so that they could either choose to embrace homosexuality or choose to live according to God's principles and standards. But they're now making that from a free place, not under compulsion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're freeing them to make a decision that lines up with their values.
So this might derail where what you're thinking. Maybe I'm not sure, but double binds, shame. If and so I'm gonna float something by you. You tell me if I'm on base or off base. If somebody doesn't develop correctly, it seems like they would carry some pathologies of shame with them.
Mm.
What is the likelihood or tendency that they're going to then re-inflict, like hurt people? What is the tendency that they are going to re-inflict others around them with their own double binds to
Yeah,
try to see, is that going to recapitulate itself and come back out of them where they start casting that shadow onto other people to control them and manipulate them?
of course. I mean, that's essentially what a generational curse is. So,
Yeah, I don't know if you have any examples of how that would work or
and it
look.
doesn't always necessarily have to be homosexuality, but there's
Yeah.
actually some. So we talked about, say, the father wound earlier, and this is well established in the research. It's just that the gay activists will say, well, the reason why so many gay men have poor relationships with their dads, or the dads were rejecting, was because their dad was rejecting them because of their homosexuality. As if, like, when they were little kids, the dad knew that he was going to be a gay man when he grew up, and he just hated him. And so it's well established in research that most men of same-sex attraction had poor relationships with their dads growing up. Now, this is for probably 3/4 of the type of guys we work with. All right, so there's other subtypes. All right, this is not universal for all guys with SSA. All right, just to make that clear.
Mm-hmm.
One of my colleagues at the Alliance for Therapeutic Choice, Sherry Golden, for her dissertation, her doctoral dissertation, she's like, well, we have all this research on the dads of these guys with same-sex attraction, but we don't have a lot of qualitative research on the dads themselves. Like, we know that these guys had these poor relationships, but what about the dads? We just assume that's because the dads recognized at an early age their son was going to be gay and they rejected them. But she decided to do a study where she interviewed the fathers of men with same-sex attraction. And what she found was the majority reported having a sense that they were not prepared to be dads, that they just didn't know what to do when they became a dad.
Not prepared to be a dad. Is that
Correct.
yeah?
Yep. And so what you see is a guy who tends to, like,
Is anybody ready to be a dad?
yeah, but if you think about it, like, so we see a lot of times, I got plenty of guys who I work with them where they have brothers, and their brothers were more stereotypically masculine, and the dad related to them well, but didn't know how to relate to them. And essentially what you're seeing there is a type of laziness on the dad's part, defaulting to what is easy. Oh, Jim, he likes hunting and fishing like I do.
Yep.
We get along. Doesn't have to put much effort into that.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul, he likes art and reading.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let him be with mom. He's his mom's son. Literally, they get assigned to be the mom's kid or whatever. And so he just doesn't know how to relate to him. And it wasn't because he was rejecting; he didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about one of my clients I work with, who he grew up with this sense that his dad just hated him and just didn't like him. And now his dad is elderly, and he always viewed his dad as like this man's man. He was a vet, and he was well liked by other guys. He was real macho. And now his dad is elderly, and he's aging, and he's dealing with a lot of health issues. So he's going with his dad to a doctor's appointment, and the doctor decides to do like a psych screening. And he asks all these questions like, how did you feel about yourself growing up? And he finds out all these insecurities that his dad had. That his dad never thought that he was masculine enough, that he was man enough, that he really was worthy of all the
So he's
accolades he got.
projecting that insecurity onto his own son.
Yeah, and I was like, all these years you thought your dad didn't like you, but yet your dad actually was insecure about himself,
Yeah.
and he just didn't know how to connect with you.
Hmm.
So we see that that this perpetuates. It might not
Mhm.
always be in same-sex attraction, but
Mhm.
there's you're going to uh, it's going to manifest in your relationships in one way or the other when you don't have that security in who you really are.
Mhm. Mhm. So, what would it take? Um, this might be too broad of a question, but what ideas would you have on how can we have a church without shame?
Mm,
Where, see, it seems like shame is a major culprit that perpetuates
yep.
behaviors that people themselves don't even want, whether they're hetero or otherwise.
Yep.
So, how could we have a church environment where it's not shameful and stigmatizing? Do you know of one anywhere, or you know what I mean? What ideas
I,
would you have about that?
I'm so blessed. Right now, I'm in a church that, with all its flaws, I think they are doing a really good job. One of our elders, um, he had kind of been incognito for several months last year, and he got in front of the congregation. I was privy to some of this already, but he got in front of the congregation this Sunday, and he shared that the reason he had been around for a while last year was because he deals with alcohol addiction,
Yeah,
and he had to go into rehab. And so he had voluntarily stepped down from being an elder for a period,
yeah,
and he was so uh, well. I guess he wasn't sure what the response would be, but that just sparked one person another coming up and like, you know what? I deal with addiction too. Another person that said, I overcame addiction. I'm
oh
so
wow,
scared to share this. And people just started sharing. And then we, as a whole congregation, when we asked, uh,
that almost brings tears to my eyes.
the pastor asked at the end, if you forgive this elder, would you be willing to stand up? And the whole congregation stands up. You know, it has to come from the top down. It has
Yeah,
to be where there's no pretense in the church. And you practice what you want to see in the church. And you're willing to lay your stuff out there. I
you
preach
practice what you
occasionally.
want to see in a church. That's really good.